When this vegetable first arrived, people called it the devil's apple. They swore it would bring madness to anyone who ate it.
Now this is the only reason we're still breathing.
What if it never came?
There's a vegetable that literally saved humankind. Without it, Europe might not exist as it does today. This vegetable caused the death of almost 1 million Irish people in a single year. This is the story of the potato. But how did this vegetable from Peru end up on your plate? The story starts in the mountains of Peru and Bolivia over 10,000 years ago. Ancient people discovered wild potatoes growing in the Andes Mountains. These weren't the smooth brown potatoes you know today. They were small, bitter, and came in dozens of different colors. People were actively farming potatoes. The Incas took it to the next level. They created something called chuño, which was basically freeze-dried potatoes. They would leave potatoes out overnight to freeze, then let them thaw in the morning. After repeating this process, they'd squeeze out all the water. The result? Potatoes that could last for years without going bad.
The sun's kind today.
And the earth gives more than we planted.
She always does, if you treat her right. Someday, maybe the world will eat from our soil.
This was revolutionary. Inca armies could march for months with chuño as their food supply. It gave them a massive advantage. Then in 1537, Spanish conquistadors arrived in Peru searching for gold and silver. Instead, they found something far more valuable, though they didn't realize it at the time. They found the potato. But here's the weird part. Europeans didn't want to eat them. They thought potatoes were poisonous. They called them devil's apples because they grew underground, which seemed suspicious and evil. For decades, potatoes were mostly used as animal feed or grown in gardens as strange decorative plants. But why did this vegetable become so important to Europe? The potato had 3 game-changing advantages. First, it gave you 3 times more calories than grain from the same amount of land. Second, it could grow in poor soil and cold weather where wheat and barley would fail. Third, it was incredibly nutritious, packed with vitamins and minerals. In the early 1600s, the Irish population exploded. By the 1700s, poor Irish families were living almost entirely on potatoes and milk. 1 acre of potatoes and 1 cow could feed an entire family for a year. But Ireland wasn't alone. In France, King Louis XVI wore potato flowers in his jacket to convince people they were fashionable and safe to eat. Queen Marie Antoinette wore potato blossoms in her hair. It worked. Soon, French farmers were planting potatoes everywhere. In Prussia, King Frederick the Great went even further. In 1756, he issued an official order commanding farmers to plant potatoes. Curious peasants would sneak in at night to steal some, which is exactly what Frederick wanted. He became known as the Potato King. And this changed everything. The potato fueled the Industrial Revolution in Britain. Factory workers in cities like Manchester and Liverpool needed cheap, filling food. Potatoes were perfect. Friedrich Engels, the famous philosopher, said the potato was as historically revolutionary as iron. More people meant more workers for factories, more soldiers for armies, and more consumers for goods. But what happens when an entire nation depends on just one vegetable? By 1845, Ireland had become dangerously dependent on potatoes. The poor, especially in Western Ireland, ate almost nothing else.
Careful with that bag. That's all we'll eat till spring.
Potatoes and milk again?
Aye, it's not much, but it's kept us breathing this long.
And they mostly grew just one variety called the lumper. It wasn't tasty, but it produced massive harvests. Then disaster struck. A disease called potato blight arrived in Europe from the Americas. It was a fungus that turned potatoes into rotting, stinking mush almost overnight. When it hit Ireland in September 1845, entire fields were destroyed in days. But here's what made it catastrophic. Ireland was growing mostly one type of potato, so they had no genetic diversity. Every potato plant was equally vulnerable. When the blight hit, it hit everything at once. The first year was bad. The second year was worse. The blight kept coming back season after season. Potatoes that looked healthy in the ground would rot within hours of being harvested. The results were horrifying. Over the next 4 years, about 1 million Irish people died from starvation and disease. Another million emigrated to America, Canada, and Britain. Ireland's population dropped from 8 million to less than 4 million. It still hasn't fully recovered to this day. Grain, cattle, and other crops were being exported to England while Irish people starved. The British government's response was inadequate and often cruel. Some officials believed the famine was God's way of punishing the Irish. The Great Famine taught the world a brutal lesson about monoculture. Depending on one crop, especially one variety of that crop, is incredibly dangerous, but it took 1 million deaths to learn it. So how did the potato become global despite this tragedy? After the famine, scientists got serious about potatoes. They started breeding different varieties with different strengths. Some resisted disease better. Others produced bigger harvests. The goal was to never repeat Ireland's mistake. Meanwhile, potatoes were spreading to every corner of the globe. They reached China at the end of the Ming Dynasty, around 1600. At first, they were a delicacy for the imperial family. But by the 1700s, as China's population exploded, peasants started planting potatoes everywhere. They could grow in the mountains where rice wouldn't work. In Africa, European colonizers introduced potatoes as cheap food for workers. At first, Africans resisted them, believing they were poisonous just like Europeans once had. But slowly, they caught on. In Rwanda today, people in the highlands consume between 150 and 200 kilograms of potatoes per year. That's more than any Western European country. Potatoes came to North America relatively late. The first certain potato crop was planted in New Hampshire in 1719. Brought from Ireland. That's why Americans still call them Irish potatoes, even though they originally came from Peru. By the 1800s, potatoes were spreading west. Idaho became the potato capital of America. The volcanic soil was perfect for growing them. By 1900, Idaho was producing over 1 million bushels annually. Today, 2/3 of American potatoes come from Idaho, Washington, Oregon, Colorado, and Maine. By the 20th century, the potato had become the 5th most important crop in the world, after wheat, corn, rice, and sugarcane. The potato didn't single-handedly save humanity. No one food could do that, but it absolutely changed the course of human history in ways few other crops have. Here's what the potato did do. It allowed Europe's population to grow massively between 1750 and 1850 without collapsing into famine. Before potatoes, Europe was trapped in what economists call the Malthusian trap. Whenever the population grew, food would run out and people would starve until the population dropped again. The potato broke that cycle. It made the Industrial Revolution possible by feeding millions of urban workers cheaply and efficiently. It enabled armies to march farther with better-fed soldiers. It prevented countless famines in Europe, Asia, and eventually Africa. But the potato also revealed a dark truth. It killed 1 million Irish people by showing the danger of monoculture and dependence on a single food source. It was used by colonial powers as a tool of control, forcing cheap food on conquered peoples. And today, the global food system still faces similar risks, with too many people depending on too few crop varieties. The potato isn't a simple hero or villain, it's both. And that's what makes its story so fascinating.